You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. When history finally records the true details of the federal prosecutions against Robert Sylvester Kelly, better known as R. Kelly, it will reveal a case so riddled with legal overreach, prosecutorial misconduct and deliberate manipulation of justice that it will stand as one of the gravest miscarriages of legal process in modern times. What began as a set of personal grievances, unresolved allegations and highly publicized accusations was weaponized by federal prosecutors into an unprecedented crusade not for justice but for destruction. Let us carefully unpack this story, a narrative buried under headlines and one-sided coverage, and one that too many have accepted without scrutiny. Because at the heart of it lies not a quest for the truth but a relentless campaign by prosecutors who abandon the very standards and ethical codes they swore to uphold. It all started when federal prosecutors, unwilling to wait for credible accusers or substantive evidence, decided to cast a wide net in search of anyone who had a grievance, real or imagined, against R. Kelly.
I'm here today to encourage victims of sexual assault or domestic violence related to these allegations to please get in touch with our office. The number to call is 773.
Instead of focusing on genuine victims with credible and well-documented claims, they publicly encouraged women to come forward with any complaint they could think of. This wasn't a pursuit of justice. It was a fishing expedition for witnesses. These prosecutors, rather than pursuing the appropriate legal channels and charges that corresponded with the allegations being made, such as defilement or statutory offenses under applicable state laws, chose instead to construct a narrative around federal RICO and Mann Act violations. Why would they do this? The answer is simple: they sought longer sentences, sensational headlines and the power of federal statutes that carry grave consequences far beyond what the original complaints would warrant. Let's be clear about this. The RICO statute was originally designed to dismantle organized crime syndicates, mafia operations and entrenched criminal enterprises that engaged in racketeering, extortion, drug trafficking and money laundering on a systematic basis. Yet somehow these prosecutors contorted the law's intent to fit allegations of personal relationships and alleged misconduct between consenting individuals. They took isolated decades-old accusations, many already rejected in earlier court cases or discredited in public discourse, and strung them together under the guise of a so-called criminal enterprise. The very idea that a singer, his personal staff and his acquaintances formed an organized criminal syndicate for the purposes of trafficking is absurd on its face. If there were credible accusations of underage relationships, then the appropriate charges would have been the individual crimes related to that conduct, not an elaborate racketeering conspiracy. Yet the government chose the RICO and Mann Act path, and because these charges permitted them to sidestep issues of jurisdiction, statute of limitations and evidentiary weaknesses, it allowed them to introduce decades' worth of prejudicial allegations, many of which bore no relation to each other, and to create a sprawling narrative that would overwhelm a jury. It also allowed prosecutors to pursue far harsher sentencing guidelines, as RICO convictions carry severe penalties meant for kingpins of drug cartels and mob bosses, not for musicians embroiled in personal controversies. But this was not enough for the prosecutors. They went even a step further, conspiring with corrupt officials within the Bureau of Prisons to illegally access and leak R. Kelly's private communications while in custody. Every American, regardless of their opinion about R. Kelly, should be outraged at what transpired here. While awaiting trial, R. Kelly, like any detainee, had certain protected rights, including the expectation that his phone calls and email communications would remain confidential, subject only to lawful oversight and in accordance with legal standards. Yet several Bureau of Prisons officers violated this trust and the law. One BOP official accessed R. Kelly's prison email and phone communications over 160 times. Let that sink in. Over 160 times. This official unlawfully intruded into a private citizen's personal communications while in pretrial detention. These emails and calls were not monitored for institutional security purposes or under lawful court order. They were unlawfully forwarded, copied and shared directly with federal prosecutors and witnesses. This information was then weaponized by the government to pressure one of R. Kelly's would-be defense witnesses, Azriel Clary, into falsely testifying against him by way of revenge. They took fragments of private conversations, twisted their meaning and used them to emotionally manipulate and charge up Azriel Clary, turning a private dispute into a public theater. What's even more shocking is that this entire incident is publicly known. The Department of Justice's own internal investigations in conjunction with the FBI revealed that one of their officials, a senior BOP officer, not only accessed these records illegally, but forwarded them to her personal computer to peruse at leisure. And what was the consequence for this official's gross misconduct? Was she arrested? Was she prosecuted or disbarred? No. She was simply retired a few months later. Quietly swept under the rug, without facing any meaningful accountability for actions that not only violated federal law but also undermined the very integrity of the judicial process. Imagine for a moment if this had happened to any other citizen awaiting trial. Imagine the outrage if prison officials leaked private communications to prosecutors to bolster a weak case. The legal system would demand answers and heads would roll. But because this happened to R. Kelly, a man already convicted in the court of public opinion, it was deemed acceptable and even commendable by some. Such selective application of justice sets a dangerous precedent for us all. And this orchestrated abuse of process didn't stop there. The government's entire case strategy relied on reviving old, unsubstantiated and often contradictory claims from individuals whose motivations were questionable at best. Instead of assembling a case based on clear, provable incidents, the prosecution relied on a patchwork of disgruntled former associates, opportunistic accusers responding to the government's open call for complaints, and circumstantial evidence that would never hold up under impartial scrutiny. It is worth emphasizing that if R. Kelly had indeed committed criminal acts against minors as alleged, the correct course of action would have been to charge him with those specific crimes and not to concoct a sprawling RICO indictment riddled with legal gymnastics designed solely to circumvent procedural safeguards and stack the deck against the accused. This blatant manipulation of federal statutes undermines the public's trust in the legal system. It exposes how prosecutors, driven by ambition and media attention, can pervert the law's original intent to fit whatever narrative they wish to pursue. The misuse of the Mann Act, a law originally enacted in 1910 to combat forced prostitution and trafficking, is equally alarming. In this case, it was applied to personal relationships and travel arrangements involving consenting adults, weaponizing century-old legislation to justify disproportionate punishment. And let's not forget the public campaign orchestrated by these prosecutors. From the outset, they broadcasted an open call for anyone harboring grievances against R. Kelly to come forward, creating an environment where unverified, embellished and often outright false claims were not only accepted but actively encouraged. Such tactics erode the principle of innocent until proven guilty and turn criminal investigations into popularity contests. The cumulative effect of these actions was not justice. It was a calculated effort to ensure R. Kelly would never again see the light of day, regardless of whether the allegations could withstand honest judicial scrutiny. They didn't just seek to convict him. They sought to destroy him professionally, personally and legally. In any fair and just society, such conduct by government prosecutors and federal officials would trigger immediate investigations, disbarments and criminal charges. Yet in this case, the misconduct was either ignored, downplayed or excused under the guise of pursuing justice for victims. But justice achieved through unlawful means is no justice at all, but rather a mockery of the principles on which the legal system stands. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.